This is Monica Perez here with fellow podcaster and veteran deep researcher Chuck Ochelli of the Ochelli Effect podcast and so much more. We are going to run the gamut today from pivotal false flags to real-time psyops, as well as get to know more about Chuck and his fascinating journey. So set your air to free flow and get ready to plunge into today's buddy dive. Hello, Chuck, and thank you for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Monica. This ought to be interesting. We don't have enough time to cover all the false flags and craziness and psyops, but let's give it a shot anyway, right?
Absolutely. No, I know. Like, that's the thing. I almost feel like this should be just us getting to know each other live and in person in front of the audience, because the thing that I like the most about you and why actually several people recommended that we get together is that I think we're both just honestly trying to figure out what's going on. There's no agenda. There's no dog in the hunt or dog in the fight. What? Whatever. Um, so I just feel like if we're going to just try to give our own opinions of what the bigger picture, I think, is like, what I always usually ask this at the end, but you can answer it whenever you want, like the true nature of power on Earth and in the universe. How high does the conspiracy go? How perfect is the coordination at what I'm watching Blacklist right now at the Cabal? But I also think specifics like the true nature of Giuliani and Trump, we are totally in alignment on some of that stuff. But first, I want people to know a little bit about you, your work, where you're from, what your journey was, like your big, kind of magnum opus or seminal work is on the JFK assassination. But how'd you get interested in it, and what's anything you want to tell us about that journey so far?
All right. Well, again, still the continuing journey, if you will, the continuing inquiry, as Penn Jones used to put it. The JFK assassination, it was the very first thing that got me into the world of, well, hey, look, maybe it's not quite as advertised, right? And it was a personal journey for me because I felt as though the Vietnam War was a criminal act committed against the American people. It was also a criminal act committed against the Vietnamese people, but hey, don't mention that. After all, we had 60,000 men that were killed in that conflict. That's not a lot, but when you consider there were another million or so returned back to the United States, mutilated either physically, psychologically, or spiritually, or all the above, it becomes a serious criminal act if it was prosecuted under false pretenses. Wait a minute, that sounds awfully familiar, because that continues to happen in these larger conflicts, doesn't it? So that for me was personal because when I was 4 years old, my father committed suicide. He was a veteran. And this was something that gripped me and definitely shaped my life going forward. And then when I applied to go to school at about the age of 18 or so, I was denied any sort of benefits and things because my father's military record didn't exist. And
What?
that started me on a journey. Yeah, there's a personal part of this that goes beyond the JFK thing, where I got involved in the JFK assassination, sure, but that was out of curiosity and out of the fact that around the 25th anniversary, when I was a teenager, they started running a lot of TV shows and I started reading. But the truth about it begins, with my father and what happened with him. He was destroyed effectively internally as a young man. Because he served in Vietnam. He went over there to fight communists. He volunteered, and he went on an interesting journey where he became disillusioned and suffered from what people would commonly call PTSD pretty severely. And he did his best to be my parent as long as he could, but then took his own life, which, as I said, changed my trajectory irrevocably. So.
Yeah, that's
where that
yeah, I have a very big family, and I have a brother who volunteered for Vietnam at that time, and he came back addicted to drugs, which he got from being literally he said there was a chain link fence connecting like the heroin factory with the base, and for 50 cents they would just put a little envelope through the thing, and whatever. There's a lot to that, but he absolutely struggled very severely. He was on the precipice of taking his own life. He did have a son, and he just could not stick around to raise him, for they're friendly now, but it's just that there was a lot of damage done, and not just the PTSD of being in battle and killing people you don't know for reasons that after you wake up that you can't validate, that there was also, I think, a lot of psychological warfare against the soldiers themselves and against American people at that time. And if the JFK thing was a coincidence, well, it had to have dovetailed because that whole thing smacks of meant to do and the whole era from the Beatles and everything else that looks to me like the powers that be gave us that conflict to destabilize this country.
Well, here's what I take as a fact. Had Kennedy not been publicly executed on November 22nd, 1963, we would have been withdrawn from Vietnam by the end of 1965. You understand?
Yeah, I agree.
So the entire conflict, I mean, there are people that are arguing against this now, but the truth is, if you read National Security Action Memorandum 263, you're quite aware that that was the plan. And it changed literally on the weekend that he was murdered. And that's almost indisputable in my mind. So, yeah, it's inexorably connected to the fact that on September 11, 1976, which is the date my father took his life, precisely that date, it's connected to that. So that's why. But again, I had a government lying to me. I was supposed to believe in, the American dream and the fact that these people were working on my behalf. And, we live in the greatest country in the world, and et cetera, et cetera. That wasn't going to be my experience. And the drug thing, you know what? I'm getting into that deeply in an audiobook that I'm creating at the moment. But that's part of my father's story also. And it became part of my story. The chapter that focuses on it actually is called The Drug War has child soldiers as well.
Yeah, I mean, not to make this about me, but just I noticed that our worldview is similar. I think our backgrounds have some parallels, and I lost two siblings to the drugs. My brother was I think it's AZT poisoning, but they said he had AIDS. He believed them, even though he had no symptoms, but he had been a lifetime IV drug user. And my sister died with a needle in her arm. They say it was fentanyl, but also a lifetime drug user. And my brother who came back from he was in Thailand during Vietnam, but he came back and was clean for a long time. And they started importing the drugs, the like really, really good heroin that you could just snort from Thailand. And my other brother, who had been totally corrupted by the counterculture, turned him back onto it. And then that gave him another 10 or 20 years of struggling with that. And I do feel like it was all just a plot. Like they didn't need to do that. It's not like we had this anarcho-capitalist society in the 60s and the government didn't do anything. They could have stopped it if they wanted, but they wanted the opposite.
Well, that's the interesting thing. And I find this current, alleged crisis of opioids really interesting because it's all a lie. Let's begin there. It's all a lie. My own personal history, again, I wound up, mixing. I was a guy who was whacking up loads of dope when I was a kid. That was how I survived, to be honest with you. My mother was a junkie. My father was involved in it too, but he was gone. But I had to survive. Okay. So I was working with stuff that is exactly the same as fentanyl in 1980. This is not new. Okay.
Right.
It is exactly the same chemical. I recognize it today. I've seen it with my own eyes today.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out what's really going on here, and I just can't crack the code. I see there was a moment like 2014 where they started talking about it, and it was coming in from Canada, and it's China is doing all this, and it's in everything. And I now know people who are dying. I can't figure it out. Crack that code for us if you've gotten that far and you don't mind spoiling your own chapter.
Well, here's the thing. It's coming from everywhere. All of the above are true. And it's being manufactured here too. It always has been. All right. This is not new. The new focus is one thing. Look, we have to rewind a little bit. You have to remember that opium has been a constant weapon throughout, centuries and centuries of our history. Opium is a weapon. Okay. It has been used to undermine and destroy societies from the outside intentionally. intentionally. If you don't know the history, you got to get into it. I don't mean you, Monica. I'm talking about the listener, really. You're probably somewhat aware of this, at least.
A little bit,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, even the whitewash stuff or the curated stuff, Alfred McCoy and stuff like there is a lot in there.
Yes, there is, but there's a deeper history here. And by the way, every war is a drug war. Okay. You can always find the element, whether it's, the Nazis taking speed or it's the fact that we had guys guarding, poppy fields in Afghanistan.
Oh my
Yeah, all
gosh,
of
those
this is
pictures are crazy.
okay. But these things are true. All right. And this is the thing. Every war is actually a drug war. Now, you want to go back to Vietnam, we could talk about the Golden Triangle, and we could talk about the fact that there was plenty of human trafficking. There was cheap drugs of all sorts that were coming in and out of there. Indeed, I found out that my father was involved in running speed in Vietnam as well. They used to run it in these little liquid bottles. Now, this is something that you don't get to read about in the history books, and Burns ain't going to cover it in his documentary, okay? There were all kinds of drugs in Vietnam, all right? And some of them were there to keep people awake. You had to stay alive. My father, despite the fact that his current record as it stands, because it reappeared in 2007 after it disappeared for many years, it reappeared in fabricated fashion. It shows him leaving the military after I was born, and I'm not noted on the record. Fun stuff. Anyway, another rabbit hole, another day.
It's okay.
But the thing is, he was involved in moving around these liquid bottles of speed, which only a few people know about, and it was mostly for the special forces. Turns out my father was recruited into a military sniper unit and all these other things. Crazy, crazy stuff. And that's what I was able to dig up on him. But anyway, the JFK, asked me about JFK. I didn't even go there. All right.
Well, I just how you were interested
So,
because I know we could do literally and should do like 3 hours on JFK just with you and your take
sure.
on it. But I was interested in what made it really grab you and because it takes a lot of time and effort and it's not easy to get any deeper on the research than the 50 years that have come before you started. So what got you motivated to do that?
Well, it all started, I was a musician, right? So I started traveling around and I'm reading these books. I listened to talk radio and read books, even though I was a heavy metal musician, right? I know, totally out of character. But there I go. I'm realizing that I'm in cities where some people live that are part of the case. So I would just pick up a phone book and see if I could find them. I'd call them up and ask them questions about stuff I read in books. That's how I started. The journey got really weird after a little while. I got into document research, wound up self educating as far as forensic research,
Yes.
ballistics, police, all over the place,
Yeah, how did you
medical
get good
legal
at the
autopsy.
research?
Um, well, that's the thing. A lot of people call things research now, which I find funny because it's just searching around on the internet, which is a form of research.
It's hard
Okay.
now though.
But that's not the only thing. Well, it's hard and it's easy. You see, I started in '96 on the internet, right? When we were exchanging things through message boards,
Yeah.
because I'd already been at it a bit. I had been to the
Mhm.
libraries. I had gone and gotten photographs. I had, interviewed
Yeah,
people
no, that's
already.
good.
Um, and when I went on there, it was like, let's exchange some stuff on message boards. I thought it was cool. Nowadays, it's a lot easier to get a hold of material, but it's also very easy to be misled. Uh,
It's
there's a
totally.
lot of disinformation, some of it well meaning, some of it, you know, not so well meaning. Okay. It's amazing. Today, you can get things through the National Archives, whereas I used to have to know what I was looking for and go there and pick up the documents myself, and all these, which also you have to learn how to do. Look, there's a wide variety of things that you have to learn how to do if you're actually going to dig into it. But for the average person who just looks around, it's a very confusing, crazy minefield of things where whatever direction you want to go in, you can find something that seems plausible, that seems likely. And I don't just mean the ridiculous official theory. I do mean all of the others. It's all in so many different directions. I mean, we could be all day with that subject.
Well, I do
Anyway,
notice
I'm just
that
running
it's
my
more
mouth.
than ever.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, say that again?
No, I'm sorry. I feel bad. I'm like running my mouth on and on,
Nope,
trying to
I
get
like
all
it
these things in
because
with you.
yeah, no, that's good. I wanted to so the thing about uh the research, this is something that I notice obviously, and it's very frustrating because it really muddies the water with people who you might have been able to reach at another time. So like Q is an example of it. All these like false conspiracy theories. I only heard your show with Sam Tripoli this morning, and that like it helped me get to know you better because your interviews are really about the person you're interviewing, and I want to know more about you. But that we're in agreement that there's just so much disinformation, like the flat Earth thing. Obviously, it's put there for a reason, and it does muddy the water. And Q, I think, was even much more damaging because I used to have a following on the radio in Atlanta. I know that um are you still in Atlanta?
No, I'm actually in Macon, but that's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, Georgia. So when I was there, I had a radio show in Georgia, and when people were starting to wake up, and then as soon as Trump came along, they all got on that train. They all started parroting to me the Q stuff, and I was like, "Don't fall for it. Anything that is just making a huge splash like that is put there on purpose. I mean, you just absolutely, it's you're just a voice in the wilderness if you're actually telling the truth. Anybody who has deep state sources, that's a problem that I don't trust. But I saw that phenomenon arise, not certainly not, it wasn't there 10 years ago when I kind of got started, but it was definitely well underway when Trump got in there. And how do is it easy for you to discern what's the disinformation, and how do you think other people should do it?
Well, I wish that I could offer the great solution for everybody, but unfortunately, I can't. We've entered a strange time here, and I recognize. Look, let's give full praise and honor to Roger Stone. Okay, you know why? Not because he's a good guy; he's actually a scumbag, but because
It's the
this is
tattoo.
precisely. Hey, forget it. Look, I interviewed this guy. I know him. I've been involved in things that where he was peripherally involved. Forget it. Anyway, but you got to give credit where credit's due. This is precisely the kind of thing that he wanted to do, and he did. He executed this very well. He is the originator of what we see now regarding this when it comes to the cues and all that. I'll tell you how I know this. He was analyzing the alt media, preparing for Trump to emerge, preparing to leverage that in 2014. How do I know this? Because somehow I became part of the wheelhouse there of his little research group, and he was familiar with my show because of the notes his people were giving him. He did very good opposition research, and he found out. And when he was on my show, he says, "I'm a big fan of your show." I said, "Come on, Roger, you know this."
I mean, I'm
You
not
know,
saying he wouldn't be if he listened, but it's very unlikely that. I mean, how long ago
well,
is
no,
this?
this is 2015, I think it was, around the time that Trump was still contending with what do you call it, the Bush in Florida, Jeb Bush. He
Yeah.
was still
Oh, okay.
contending with him.
All right.
So I had him on for that Clinton's War on Women book, which I think makes a lot of valid points. See, I don't just swing one direction or the other. I'm after every scumbag. I don't care,
Yeah.
But
No, I like that.
and Clinton's another. Anyways, but I thought it made a lot of valid points. He says, "I'm a big fan of your show." I talked to him off here. I said, "Roger, come on, you're lying to me here. I mean, that's very nice of you to say or whatever, but you're lying to me because I know that he had made threats against another JFK person for disagreeing with him on a JFK book a couple of years before, and I actually offered to help protect that person. Not going to say who it was when he was making threats against him." Okay,
What was the
and I'm
issue?
just
What
like,
was
"Yeah,
the
you're not
point
a
of
fan of my show."
contention?
Well, he's one of these people who claim that Lyndon Johnson is definitely responsible for the
Got it.
assassination and blah blah blah. But he does it. I don't want to delve into that too deeply
No,
because
that's
believe me,
fine. I
there's a
just
whole
wanted
rabbit
to
hole.
know the thing. I just wanted to know that one thing.
Yeah, that's where it
So you
starts. But he
discovered
wanted
Roger
to take
Stone was the
serious issue.
guy. Yeah.
Well, I discovered he was one of the guys because, like I said, this opposition research was being done. He had details on my show he knew off the top of his head. He never listened to my show. He had no idea who he was dealing with. But he had the details because it turns out he had gone through and made the connection there. And if you notice, he's the guy who pops up on Alex Jones. He's the guy who turns Alex Jones into the new Trump progenitor in the alt media, right? And then the next thing you know, quite frankly, even though there was money offered to various people in the Patriot movement, okay, the Patriot radio movement, I happen to know this, to support Trump ahead of him even winning the nomination, okay, in the alt media. That was one of the points of leverage they wanted to use, is the alternative thinkers, the people that were outside of the box. The fact that he was signaling by saying, the Iraq war was BS. The fact is that Bush did things wrong. All that stuff that we were saying for many years in the alt media circles, in the alternative thinking area, which had nothing to do with partisan politics, that was about the false left-right paradigm, that was about it's all BS, they're all part of the same show, they're all part of the same corporate entity, get used to it, okay, nobody's on your side. The people that were saying that, they hijacked it. They hijacked it really, really well. And that was Roger Stone's little psyop. And he does it well. Some people say that what a rat. Let's be kind. Rat fornicators. Is that a yeah? That's what they
Sure.
call them. But either way, opposition research, flinging dirt in different directions. This is Roger Stone's bread and butter, and he was part of that campaign. Go back, look at the history, and you'll know. You can track it. He gets away from it. He walks away officially, but believe me, the methodology remained behind. And that's exactly how that all got started. Now, this Q thing, on the other hand, I think that might have been dreamed up by some people on, the alternative message boards. But again, a psyop that definitely was lended a hand by some people who were in the know, did have some power, and were able to make it big. And then it was legitimized by the president of the United States. Wow. What you can't. This is like the plot of a bad B movie from the 90s already.
It's
All
like
right.
when Hillary Clinton said that she was frustrated in the basket of deplorables, whatever, and Alex Jones, I was like, wow, she just like doubled Alex Jones, which are already sizable listenership. She just doubled that in one sentence.
Oh yeah. No, but that's the key here. Everybody goes after and say, "Oh, look, Trump was being, he was facing off with the MSM. You should be on his side. He's, they're against him." They weren't against him. You got to look at this again. See, I love how you brought that up to begin with. You got to look at the larger picture, right? You can't view a parade standing on the ground watching it go by because you don't know how it ends. You got to go up in the air, baby, because then you can see the whole thing. You can see the beginning and the end. Tell you what happens here. Trump wasn't somebody who was opposed by anybody in the media. He was a commodity. He was programming. He was the content. CNN has a foil all day long where they have programming all day long. Now they don't even have to invest money in any sort of investigative reporting. Nothing.
Yes. Oh,
all they got to do is follow him in his tweets.
The only reason, or the number one reason I thought that he would win over Biden, well, there were two reasons. One was I knew they wanted actual conflict about the election, and I felt and I feel that I was correct in thinking that the Republicans were not going to cause violence. They just weren't. They don't protest violently, and that did not happen. January 6th was totally made from whole cloth, that idea that it was violent or anything. But it would have been easier to just trigger the left that's been programmed to get triggered and to actually show up in force and disobey rules. And so I felt that, but I also felt that they had such amazing entertainment value with this guy. 24/7 news cycle, just absolutely edge of the seat. What is he going to say next without ever caring about the policies at all? Anything could have happened on his watch and did. I mean, he had those executive orders. He did warp speed. He did all of that stuff. But when he calls Maxine Waters a cow, everybody talks about it for 3 days straight. I mean, how do you replace that? And now
Yep.
with Biden, like I can't even bring myself to read the newspaper. I went from 5 shows to 1 show basically because it just wasn't engaging, and just as bad stuff is happening, if not worse.
Well, see, the beauty of it though is that you could feel exhausted, you could feel empowered, you could feel pissed off, and all of it out of the same set of actions. It was a grab bag, what did they used to call that? When you could a la carte. Okay, the a la carte menu. All right, pick your reaction. Okay, pick your solution because you
Yes.
talk to somebody about what went on during those 4 years, depending on their political orientation, a lot got done, nothing got done. There was nothing but chaos. It's a totally like just, it's a Rorschach test. Tell me what this ink blot looks like. That's it. And that's all it is. It was an ink blot for 4 years. What
And
really got done in those 4 years outside of, yeah,
what
good.
you're describing is exactly how I described what Trump's approach. So Obama's approach, I used to say, was like psychic paper. Like if you watch Doctor Who and he'll put a piece of paper up and you read onto that paper whatever it is that you want to see or he wants you to see. With Trump, he did the opposite. He didn't put up a blank piece of paper. He put everything up there at once, like immigrants are rapists and nice people. There's,
Yep.
Nazis on both sides or whatever. And then you just got to pick which thing you heard. So if you listen to CNN or Fox that night, you would hear the soundbite, the first part or the second part. He put everything on there. And that's what I think that's similar to what you're talking about.
Exactly. So he was perfect. And you know what? Take a look back at how those corporate entities, those broadcast entities were doing. Okay. Previous to Trump coming in office, they were dying. They were getting their heads beaten in by people like us. That's what was happening. Not no more. Their ratings went up. Their business models changed. They're all over the map now. But you know what? They all got healthy off of Trump. Not just Fox, but MSNBC, but CNN, CBS, NBC,
Zucker was running
all of them.
CNN, and he's the one who trained Trump as the boss in The Apprentice. It's so obvious.
Yeah. I grew up in New Jersey. Okay. I grew up in New Jersey, a little time in New York, New Jersey. I'm well familiar with this guy. I couldn't believe it that people were going to buy this nonsense. All right.
I know.
I really couldn't. I said to Roger, I said, Roger, this can't be serious because I know Trump. He's full of crap. He beats everybody he can in business. This is what he does commonly. Before he got into the office, I said this. He beats everybody in business commonly. I've actually met him. One time I met him. And funny circumstances, I shook his hand at a backstage thing for a WWE bodybuilding crap. I forget what it was, but something in Atlantic City. And I happen to know the guys who ran security, so I was there. But it's so funny. I was standing there with, let's call them Italian businessmen that I happen to know. And they said, the funny thing about this guy is that he'll beat everybody else for $1, but not us. I said, yeah, I figured that, So, but this is kind of reality here, which cracks me up because it's like everybody who was from there should have known. This is a real estate hustler from Queens, all right, and he's made nothing but his name marketable.
It's
all
beyond
right. How
that.
do you go broke in Atlantic City in 3 different casinos?
100% agree with you. 100%. He was a Kardashian by the end. It was just, he was famous for being famous. He went broke. Unbelievable. They were like, I was a good businessman. I used bankruptcy for my benefit. And I'm like, that was because you were a bad businessman. But I stumbled upon an expression yesterday that I think totally applies to him, his father, and Elon Musk. And it's called the political entrepreneur. So all of them got their money from exploiting the government. So Trump's father used congressional funding for projects and stuff. Trump himself got through the back door. Nobody else would have been able to get it this way, the casino license, because he did rub elbows with the bent nose types in New York, and you just would never have been able to get that. He had some sketchy dealings that were covered up. And then, so you're in a completely isolated industry where if you get that license, it should be a license to just print money. And the same thing with that post office in DC. He shouldn't have been able to own that post office. And it was just a license to print money, which I think Dianne Feinstein's husband was a part of. And then, so he was just government connected and getting his money all the way up, and yet he was accepted by the right, in addition to his immigration stance, which you say obviously he hired illegal immigrants, he married immigrants, he was an adulterer, serial adulterer. Like, this guy was not, shouldn't have been accepted by the Christian right. Even my mother used to think that he was no good, Nick. And then all of a sudden she was charmed and would say, he loves this country, I don't care. I'm like, I don't know about that, Mom.
That was the thing I couldn't fathom, is how it is that, especially all these Christians, right, who in the past, I'm 50 years old, so I remember the moral majority. I remember when it was like, it's about character. I remember all that, and that's a poof gone. You know what I mean? He became God's imperfect instrument to do God's work all of a sudden. What did Brother Ali said? They're holding open auditions for the part of David, right? Here we go. This is what I couldn't believe it. I said to Roger Stone, come on, man, this has to be a joke. He can't be serious. I didn't think he would win the first time because, look, I should have known better, though. I mean, even the CIA couldn't have stolen the election for Hillary with a straight face. Nobody was enthusiastic about that woman, period. So I guess I should have known better, but I was in total disbelief.
Me too.
Because, again, like you said, the immigrants, I went to Trump properties. I went to the casinos. And you know what? Find somebody there who could even speak English sometimes.
Why were you there?
How come? Because they were there. It was Atlantic City. It was.
You're just saying you went to the Trump casinos. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, I didn't understand, because some people, I didn't know if you'd work there or whatever. But I've been to the Trump casinos too.
But I knew people who worked there. I knew guys who worked in the kitchens. I knew guys who worked security. I knew guys. Come on. So I knew plenty of people that worked with him and for him. And by the way, any of the time when he was a builder in New York, take a look at that whole cement, like how it is you got cement at the time. You'd have to have a conversation with somebody connected to a guy named Castellano. Well, but Castellano ran that, okay? That was how Castellano made most of his money. Come on. You couldn't get more than enough to pour a driveway in New York.
Definitely. No, I know. And that brings
somebody with a vowel at the end of their name. Come on. This is the way it was, and that cracks me up about Giuliani too.
We're having a lot of connectivity issues here. So yeah, we're cutting off each other. I think that we have a connectivity issue. That's right.
Maybe it's me.
So we can clean it up for the live viewers. I'm sorry, but we'll be able to fix it in the after, because it's recording locally for both of us, and we'll just put it together afterwards. So, but I did want to say, with the Giuliani thing, this is something I heard you talk to Sam about, and I had so many similar issues with Giuliani. I mean, first of all, he took out the Italian mob, and guess what filled the void? The Russian mob. And you said something about, I don't know what it was, like he was picking and choosing who he was going after for one violation or another. And I personally
didn't take out. Well, here's the thing. You practice law in New York, right?
I am licensed in New York, but I never practiced. Really.
Oh man.
But I get it. So yeah, I had this experience where it was my birthday, and I'm a real New Yorker. I used to smoke Marlboro Reds, a pack a day.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were licensed in New York. My mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was a heavy smoker and I liked martinis, and I was just absolutely infuriated when Giuliani, after Bloomberg had failed to do it, Giuliani shoehorned the smoking ban into New York through a health regulation. And my husband was really sweet about presidents back then. And he found a steakhouse in New York that allowed smoking still. Like they did some jumped through some kind of hoops and got this exemption from that law. And I went, he got us the best table in the house, and we were sitting there and I was smoking my cigarettes, drinking my
You had
martini.
to have
And
family working.
say it again.
You had to have only family working there or something like that.
Well,
That
I
was
don't
the
know
loophole, I think.
what it was, but what happened was the waiter came up to me and said, "Oh, you should be so honored. You're sitting at the mayor's table." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, this is where the mayor likes to sit when he smokes his cigars. And right over there is the attorney general smoking his cigar." And I was like, that was just so galling to me because I was so mad at Giuliani for taking the smoking away. And he carved out his own favorite. I think it was called Frank's, if I'm not mistaken, his own favorite steakhouse to smoke it, and it was just the worst. And the same thing with like gypsy cabs, who as soon as he tried to get a gypsy cab and they wouldn't do it because they knew who he was, and then the next day he just cracked down on gypsy cabs. So when they said, "Oh, Ubers have taken over New York and they can't stop it," I knew that it was just a total setup, because they were stopping gypsy cabs, which you can call an Uber and shut it down. Gypsy cabs are a little squirrely, but he was very selfish in that way.
No, but that is the way policy was always run. And again, I pointed out, not all of the mob took a hit while Giuliani was the mob buster. See, you got to look at who didn't get hit. Okay, because there are groups that didn't get hit. There
Like
are
who?
brothels that weren't shut down. Well, I don't want to
Like
go.
just
I don't want to
specific
quote it
ones?
at the
Just
moment
specific
because I
ones.
don't
Yeah,
have it in
okay.
front of me.
Because I'm thinking Russians,
Well,
just the
specific. Let me
Russian mob
put it
took
to this.
over.
Well, that's true. That's true. But there were Italians that were untouched as well. Okay. I'm just saying you got to take a look at who still was able to operate, pardon me, but who was still able to operate their whorehouses. Okay. Who was still able to operate the massage parlors after he cracked down. Take a look. You'll find that there were still some in operation for a long time after he cracked down on all that. Okay. It happened.
Yeah, and I think that maybe now that you're talking about it, Gotti, I think a lot of people wanted to take Gotti out. Maybe he took Gotti out for some of the other guys. You never know. So look, we've hit Giuliani, we've hit
Well, see,
Trump, we've
there's the
hit Flat
thing.
Earth.
Junior tried to run.
Boy, this connection is terrible. Maybe it's me.
I don't know. Maybe it's me. I'll see. I'll check my settings.
Super sorry. I'm in on the Ethernet, but it could be. Let me check, make sure everything else is shut down. Are you back? Let's try this again.
Yeah, I'm on an Ethernet. Yeah, I'm on an Ethernet also, so I don't know. Let me go to a low definition.
Yeah,
See
it
if that
shouldn't.
helps any.
It shouldn't do
I'll
that.
give you a
But
lower definition,
anyway,
maybe.
so super sorry. I'm sorry if it's me. But so let me ask you this. Okay, so we've taken out some sacred cows here. Let's talk about Putin. What do you think about, is Putin, is there a cabal and everybody sits around a table and they're in complete agreement about everything and they're all playing roles? Are some people self-serving? Is Putin self-serving? Is he serving the cabal? What do you think?
My opinion on Putin is pretty simple. He is part of a competing faction. Okay, and these people do compete with each other. Make no mistake. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for conflict. We'd have a full-on one world order already if there wasn't competition. And it appears to me as though Putin is attempting to reassemble, and he's another one who went through the PSYOP process, the PR process as well. Again, track what they did with alternative media for a long time. We were fed RT as a great alternative, right, to our BDSM because they were willing to tell some truths about some of the ugliness in America. And that's true. And I mean, I've even tried to go over this with Lee Camp and other people who have been on RT and all that. And they don't really want to hear it. You're useful. You're useful to them because there is that's state-run media. That is state-run media. It is not an honest, objective source, But when I started doing this in 2013, it was like they were taken as gospel by these alt media people.
They were
I couldn't
better
understand.
then. It got worse since then. Just like the internet and so many other things, it comes out as being more balanced, more plausible, and then it just starts to shut down little by little. However, there is value in getting the other side of the story, but neither of them comes out and says Edward Snowden is fake or ISIS is the U.S. Because they both want to use that. They like those psyops. I think there are plenty of psyops that Putin just piggybacks on. And I don't know if that's at a certain level an agreement or it's just he knows he might as well use it if it's there. Like why out Edward Snowden as fake when you can emphasize the bad things he says about America?
Right. What's useful is useful. Okay. And there's been plenty useful to Putin who effectively rebuilt the Soviet Union, except the Russian Federation now. Rebuilt it. But what did he do? He brought in the gangsters, basically, who still had functional business and recreated the government with that. Really a brilliant move. I get it. But the thing is, this guy is not a good guy. All right. And Ukraine, there are people in Ukraine getting punished for this, okay, that are not Nazis, that are just people trying to get through their lives, okay? The place is literally the size of Texas, all right? We're dumping money into it. This is not a simple black and white issue, is all I'm trying to say.
I'm
Quite
pretty
frankly,
pro.
I always stand on the side of the anti-war anyway. All right. I'm not for this. I don't believe in empire. I don't like.
But we did the coup, and we do have blood on our hands for the 8 years of abuse the West perpetrated on the right in Ukraine. That is my position. I can't not state that, but I understand what you're saying. And people are suffering on both sides. And Putin, I've been to Russia a couple of times actually, and the rank and file, like the people who I was interacting with who were working, cab drivers and stuff, I never met anybody who was like, oh, thank goodness communism is over and Putin is great. They're like, he's just a rich oligarch and it's super corrupt. And although I know it's standing online for shoes, but a lot of them said they don't really care. That it's very weird. It's very weird. I can't believe it. But anyway, he was not beloved in the communities that people I interact with.
No, of course not. But look, it's like you and I being held responsible for the torture programs in the Middle East. I mean, you can't hold an entire people responsible for what the government perpetrated. I mean, it's that simple. You know very well we tortured and maimed people in Iraq. Okay, that's publicly known fact, right? As far as U.S. Assets, they did that. Now, you and I being held responsible for that, not really sensible, is it?
No, but you have to also, we do have a certain responsibility because we are perceived as having a representative government. And I just don't know how to do, the ballot box can't be trusted. We can speak out, but you're right. A lot of that is exploited. And if you hear Americans that broadcast out of Russia, obviously they're there to make America look bad. It's very propaganda-y. And yeah, like I do try to stay away from acting like there are heroes in this story because there aren't. But we have to deny that we consent to this from our government because it looks like consent.
This, and you're right, there are no heroes. That is the point that I'm trying to make about this, is that nobody is standing on the right side of this situation. This is all what happens when you have an international community that's allowing interference from greater powers on smaller nations. And listen, that's not the only place on the planet it's happening. It's not the only person who's doing it. What are we talking about? Things that the United States has perpetrated now, I don't know, ever since I've been alive for sure. And before that, I know. But here we go, right? We talked about Vietnam. What do they call it there? The United States War of Aggression.
Do
Okay.
they really?
Which yeah, that's what they call it. It was the War of Aggression, the U.S. War of Aggression. We call it the
But I
Vietnam
don't
War.
again, I think the people in the South did not want the communist government imposed upon them either. I mean, this idea of having territorial integrity within a country when regions are absolutely diametrically opposed on how they want to be governed, I'm all for schism.
Well,
So
look,
yeah,
the will of the people, to me, the will of the people should be the thing that is protected and promoted at all times. But you know what? We're not in charge of the whole planet, and we shouldn't be interfering in everybody else's business either, right? So
agreed.
it's again a dicey issue. Who's the good guy in the Ukraine situation? I don't have one. Okay, Monica, I don't have one to offer. I really don't. I do know
There
that
were some. Alexander Zakharchenko was one, but he was assassinated. There were real heroes in those regions.
yeah, there were, but see, here's the fun part. Just like in the United States, what happens if you stand up and you start talking about peace, or what happens if you stand up and you start talking about, I don't know, let's look out for the people instead of the various military industrial complexes. What happens to you? Ask Dr. King about it. Ask Malcolm X about it. Ask Bobby Kennedy about it, because they all caught bullets. That's what happens. I mean, and that's just here in the U.S.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere else, and sometimes it's the U.S. who does it too. I mean, you can look to Guatemala, you can look to El Salvador, you can look to the various narco states, which we are responsible for propping up and creating. Yeah, sure. That's what
Yeah.
happens if you try and speak to the will of the people. Yeah. Mhm.
So what do you think is going on at the top? Like, do you think that Putin that he's just acting as the villain because that's what we need, or is he acting in his own interests? And I mean, how fragmented do you think the most powerful echelon is?
All right. Well, this is where I go off the rails with some people, okay? Because here's the thing: a guy like Putin and the Bidens and the Trumps and all the names of people are not really relevant here. Because the people that are actually the controllers have a very anti-human agenda and are smart enough to remain in the shadows. Okay, the Bill Gateses and the people that execute these things. Yeah, they're out there for their own interests, but they're also out there serving a greater interest, which has absolutely nothing to do with. Look, it doesn't matter how much money somebody has if you control the way it's printed and what it actually represents, right? It doesn't matter if you control a
Right.
nation.
Of course. Yeah.
These things are small potatoes, okay? So yeah, these different actors come off and on the stage, but who's really running the show? You don't see them. That's the way I look at it. And unfortunately, it's a very anti human agenda. It's got nothing to do with wanting to kill us all. That's just incidental. It is about control. It is a higher spiritual sort of issue that is very difficult to describe, which we constantly have to lay out, I think, by showing these examples of the observable. But a lot of this is very unobservable in my mind. Now, you might think I'm a nut job now because I said it that way, right, Mark?
No, no, I find
But
that actually
it's the
very
way I see
interesting,
it.
and I want you to tell me more because to say that killing us all is incidental, and I do understand the control part. That's not a mystery to me, but what do you mean? Are they trying to like upload us? Not well, leave us behind for sure, but is it an experiment? Like, why do you think that killing us all is incidental?
Because hell, any other prison is easy to monetize. You know what I'm saying? It is about a spiritual currency as opposed to this artificial fiat crap, which all boils down to a digital representation anyway, which can be erased at the snap of a finger. It's nothing. All of that is nothing. Sure, there is the transhumanist agenda and those that wish to transcend this world and all that. I can't claim to know the fullness of that agenda. I'm not in on all that stuff. We can see glimpses of it here and there. We can see these scientific advances. People want to go to Mars. People want to go beyond this planet and everything else. Doesn't matter if you wreck this joint, if you got the next one waiting for you. I get it. But the fact that we're being destroyed here systematically, it's all part of just the learning process. It's not, it's like as much consideration that's given to lab rats is what's given to us, really.
Yeah, I agree with
I
that.
think by these people that know they're in control, you know. So to me, it's not as personal as a lot of people want to make it. I mean, it's personal for you and me because we have to suffer through this. We're here and we're facing the brunt of it. The panopticon of weaponry is aimed at humanity in general, you know, and some people would say, well, that makes no sense because aren't these people human too? Maybe not. Maybe not. And definitely
Or
not.
they think that there's a gateway for them.
Or on a spiritual level, they are not the same as us. You understand? That's where
On a
I look at
spiritual level or a physical level, because there's some people who think that they're actually DNA wise something different, and then spiritually, I would agree with you. I mean, you could simplify it and say it's a battle between good and evil, like actual, real satanic, the good is the bad kind of stuff, or an actual, interdimensional phase shift kind of thing.
Mhm. Well,
So, what
that's
do
the
you
thing
think?
is that no, that's the thing is that look, it is. If you want to oversimplify it, sure, we could talk about good versus evil, but I think it's about the ability to lord, the ability to. It's an illusion anyway. These people that think they're actually something different, it's an illusion. It's very much like how many races are there? One among us, really. That's the bottom line. The rest is an illusion. Okay, and we could get into the simulation and all that if you wanted to, but honestly, I think it's a waste of time. To me,
Yeah, me
it's
too. I
about
agree. I agree. I agree.
the battle.
The way you think is so similar
Right.
to.
Yeah, but to me, it's about the struggle over what is life. Okay, and they think that somehow they're going to be uploaded into and whatever. Well, maybe not. Maybe they think they're already there, and we are just part of the process. We're just the lab rats they're using to figure out exactly how certain things work, and it takes time. But that's it. It's not even personal. It's not even like, I mean, yeah, there are some things that are gained by suffering. You can glean things from it. We know about certain dark spiritual practices. Again, the hidden knowledge, right? It is there. It is accessible now more than ever. But I do believe it's an existential battle more than anything. It is far beyond the physical realm and far beyond the politics and the really rudimentary parts of that, which are nothing more than ritual and representation. It's well beyond that. I know that sounds again like craziness, but
No, I
at the
mean,
end of
in
the
the
day,
spectrum of the people that we talk to, I would say, funny enough, like I used to get a lot of flack for being like totally conspiranoid or whatever. And I actually think that I'm like the least down the road of conspiranoid now because I have a hard time wrapping my mind around anything that's outside the three dimensions or the four dimensions, including time. I mean, I'm like, time is linear, this table is here. This idea, I really live my life like there's a God and I'm totally Catholic, but sometimes I just think, and I've read Tolstoy says the same thing. I just think, like, really, I really think that I'm going to die and have a conversation with somebody who knows my name. Like, that's ridiculous. So it's hard, even what I live and want so much to believe, like it's hard for me to get my mind around. I'm that, I guess, concrete a thinker. So but then there are people who kind of embrace the whole spectrum of everything from their stuff under Antarctica, and there are Bigfoots, and the ayahuasca is communicating with another dimension, and all of that. So it doesn't sound like you're not a flat earther. I actually already got yelled at for saying that flat earth was a psyop because I've witnessed the ball earth in many different contexts, including I was in the Concorde once and I saw that it was round. That could be an illusion, There are other things too. So you're not that. You're not a flat earther, right? So there's some
No, I'm not
places
a
on the
flat
spectrum.
earther. No, no, look, I'm not a flat earther. I definitely believe that there is a three-dimensional reality that we have to deal with. Uh, but there are things beyond it as well. Philosophically, you could say that even things that are created in fictional literature and in fiction in general are simply as real as anything else in a certain from a certain point of view. Once the idea has been realized, it is reality, right? Um, and so on and so forth. There's one way to look at it, and then there is the very realistic way to look. I break down. I spent an entire series going through the myths on the JFK assassination, breaking down stuff that you back with evidence. Okay, you must be able to back things with evidence. What realm are we working in? We're working in the 3D realm. Time being linear, I could argue with you about that,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I'm sure.
because we only have the moment that we're in, truthfully, right? Anything that's past is past. The future has not occurred yet.
Yeah.
But it all does occur at once, after all, right? And from a certain perspective, again, if you're not able to measure the increments of time, it's kind of irrelevant too. You're only here for a maximum of 100 years. That's not even a blink of an eye in your lifetime, generally speaking, right?
Yeah,
So
cosmically.
it's irrelevant. We can work from the 3D cosmically, right? Thank you. Cosmically, we could work from that direction, or we could work from let's deal with what is here now in the 3D. I do both. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and sometimes you got to switch gears. I get it. But even I wouldn't even poo-poo any of these stuff when it comes to, like, I don't call myself a Christian at all. I call myself a pagan, actually. But I don't say that any of the Christian order is a lie or inaccurate or anything like that. The Bible's not history, but it doesn't mean that it's false. You know what I'm saying? Things like that. You can take it from a bunch of different directions. All right. There's a philosophical way to look at it. There is a psychological and spiritual way to look at things. And then we can also look at the hard evidence in the 3D world too. You can do it all. It's possible.
So what is your tell me a little bit more. This is kind of where we started, but and I do
Sure.
have some more time, but I think I want to circle back to why, how you got to do podcasting, why you're doing it, and what you hope to get out of it or to give through it, and the other work you're
Right.
doing.
Well, generally, okay, when it comes to the podcast, I started out with the idea that there was a lot of stuff not being covered, not being done. And I was complaining to other podcasters, and they said, "Why don't you do it yourself?"
Yeah.
So I did.
Right.
James Corbett, and it was James Corbett, Jack Blood, and Clyde Lewis mainly that said, "Well, why don't you go ahead and do it your damn self then if you're going to complain about what we're doing?" So I did. And I started that. Didn't had no idea what I was going to do with it. Just I was going to do it. And that's all I do now. Is just the work, through my show, and also I produce others. Mainly, what I want to do is empower people to learn rarefied information, things that the MSM's not going to tell you, but also the indie and alt media is seemingly controlled not to tell you as well.
There's
Okay,
a lot of
so
that for sure.
yeah, yeah, there is, and some of it is for very practical reasons. I get it,
I know, but
some people don't want to go through. Yeah. Some of it's for very practical reasons. Some of it's for monetary purposes. I don't make a lot of money. I barely survive doing what I'm doing. But I care about the world that children that I have been responsible for are going to inherit. I've got children in their 20s, and I've got an 8-year-old, and I want to leave this place just a little better than I found it. And if I can inform people along the way with information they're not going to get elsewhere, then that's good enough for me. And I'm also trying to empower other people who have different visions of that, through my little network and producing other shows. And I've done that over the years too. So
So
that's the whole purpose of it. Yeah.
I think it's pretty impossible to do what you're doing and what I'm doing, like not and some people I know, not a lot, but there are people who really are financially successful with this kind of stuff. But if that's not your motive and you're not controlled opposition, but you're just doing it because of what you said, and that's my reasons too, there's you have to have some hope. And I would ask you, what's your like most optimistic hope for, not necessarily the end game of what we're doing, but the most optimistic hope of the world that you are going to end up leaving your kids, that we will leave our kids? And what is kind of your worst case scenario fear of if it's too late? If it's too late, what are we looking at? What is a future 25 years down the road looking at? Or what's like, it would be great if it were this instead?
All right, I'll put it to you this way. Look, it may indeed be too late. Doom and gloom may have already set in, and we may not be able to pull back away from this particular epoch. Indeed, human history may be completely erased, and we may have to start again. That may be the case, but I have this crazy idea that at any given moment, there are enough of us, and there is enough intelligence on the planet. There is enough spiritual strength on the planet that if we choose to, we can turn all this around in a second. And it is through the force of will. It is through the force of intelligence. It is through the force of cooperation. It is through the force of guess what? Being the psychosocial creatures that we are designed to be. We are meant to work together. We are meant to conspire, believe it or not. We are meant to do that. Anything in human history that's ever been accomplished has been accomplished through conspiracy. We are meant to be conspirators. Okay. And we should conspire to make this place better. And we could. Scientifically, we're not running out of resources. Scientifically, we're not running out of anything. The artificial scarcity that's been imposed upon us is a different issue from the reality which we face. And we could at any moment choose to take hold of the one thing we have in common, which is this little rock that we all inhabit. So I'd love to optimistically see that. Now, do I know that we are going to do that? No. Do I know that we're capable of it? Yes. Do I think it's too late? Maybe. But there it is. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's excellent. I agree with that, and I think that I agree that the scarcity is artificial. I agree that it could just end overnight, like this whole their big T they's their grip on our minds and to some extent our souls. But I do feel like the one thing that maybe they don't understand, because you say they're like literally different, of a different nature, and maybe this is why they don't understand it, but I feel like our nature is that we have a moral imperative, that we do understand the concept of right and wrong, good and evil, and we can distinguish between them, and we understand that one makes, is more right, more correct. And then we have reason, we have free will, we can do it, we can use all these things, and that would totally neutralize them overnight if there really were an awakening. So I agree with you, that is hopeful, and that is our hope, and it's definitely within the realm of possibility. I'm starting to think, just as we're talking, that there might have to be just a moment that Big T they fears, but a moment where something happens that's just too much. And I was hoping that it was that dumb derailment story, which it looks like, bad things happened in Ohio for sure. But the fact that it happened in the town where the movie that they made about it in advance was made, that movie White Noise documentary. I don't know if you've been following this story, but there was a documentary made, or a movie made in East Palestine, about a train derailment and a toxic air event. And then here you are a year later and it actually happens. And I'm like, okay, if you don't think that if that's not a moment where you're like, this is ridiculous, that is impossible. If you still think that the world has these highly mutable laws of coincidence, gosh, I don't know what the moment has to be if that wasn't good enough. But anyway, so I think there might be a moment, and they better watch out, because it would be the end for them, because this is all they're only getting this done through the consent of the people they're oppressing.
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. And here's what the problem is: that's not a large enough event. That's not large enough, I think. We need something that is a codifying and a codifying event that really does galvanize the masses in general. We have to begin to accept that we have a great deal more in common, all of us, than we have to against one another. We have to stop with this because we've been purposely positioned to be in opposition to one another, be busy fighting over a political and social idiocy, as opposed to actually turning our attention to people that are literally uh, uh, running the anti-human agenda. That is happening. I don't care if you're a conspiracy theorist or not. You must see that part of it.
Yeah.
And at some point, yeah, there has to be an event that will. But so it's not going to be something like that. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. How many times do we have to get things shoved in our face? The predictive programming. They created Soma, a drug, after it was in literature. They created all these things. I mean, come on. How many times do we have to see that, Skynet is real? How many times do we have to see that, I wonder why it is we're floating around all these little helicopter toys? Well, get used to the drones overhead. Yeah,
So
sure.
what is the moment
How
then?
many
If it
times
can't
is
be just an awakening, what must it be? What is the hope for that thing to happen? For us to neutralize them through force of will or just stop cooperating? Like, what is it?
if I knew what that moment was, I would be doing everything in my power to set it off. And
Yeah.
I would be working with others to set it off.
Well, I
So
think
I
we
don't
are.
know. That's the truth.
We don't know what that moment is, but I do think
Well,
we're trying to position ourselves to keep the information flow going so that we can, if it's there, we can communicate it. Because that was the thing with Ohio. If people didn't know about that movie, they can't know. But you're right. Even if they did know, they wouldn't care. So it's got to be bigger than that.
right. And
So
there's a weird thing going on with Ohio in general, by the way. Ohio in general, for some reason, is a pivot point. I don't know what's going on there.
they're
But
after the Amish.
they fed it through the video games now. There's this whole thing about Ohio is the place where things are crazy. They've done this. It's a weird sort of thing where there's a trend on Ohio. So I don't know what that means. But I do know, I don't think it's Amish in Pennsylvania too. I think there's something else going on there, and I don't know.
Well, they have to just
But
take
there's
out
something
state
to
by
this
state.
where we're
They
seeing
did
a
Georgia.
lot more events are going to occur right there for some reason.
They did Georgia, they did Texas. They just have to go state by state. That's what I think they're doing. And Ohio is bad because the Amish would be this little control group that doesn't take vaccines and stuff. And you can just look at their rates of autism or strokes or heart attack. I mean, that's what I was worried about the Amish is that they they it can't word can't get out that they are a control group that could be studied on either side. They don't want to be studied, and the big T they does not want them to exist. But okay, so I want to wrap it up. We've both had some connectivity issues, I think, today. So I think we should do this again. We should do it again
Sure.
with, like some current events. Just hit, maybe I'll just, I do these deep dives as often as I can. And I'll just take one event like the train derailment, and I'll just do a 45-minute show on that, do as much research as I can in a day or two. And maybe just I'll accumulate a few of those topics and see what you're working on, and we can get back together and do a little rapid fire that only New Yorkers can do. But as it is, I keep talking over you, and a real New Yorker would like let the other one, but we can't. Our connectivity is interrupting our flow, babe. So we'll have to do it again just to
That's all right.
use it as an excuse anyway to do it again. So
Sounds
tell people
good.
where they can
Sounds
find
like
you.
a good. Real simple, Ochelli.com, Ochelli.com. That's the main place to go. I got a link tree around on social media and stuff, a whole bunch of things, but that's the main place.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I greatly appreciate your time today, Chuck. I was really looking forward to it. I love exchanging ideas with people who think so deeply about so much and so broadly. I love the big picture stuff as well. And I can't wait to dig into some specific issues with you next time. Really appreciate your time and attention. That's Chuck Ochelli at Ochelli.com and the Ochelli Effect podcast. And you have been listening to me, Monica Perez, on Deep Dives. Gonna hit my little outro, and if you wait a second, we can keep talking.